Hello, my name is Arman Kajandi, and today I'll be speaking to you about layer-dependent signal fluctuation in BOLD and VAPER fMRI. CBF and CBV-based fMRI capture layer-dependent activity with greater spatial specificity than BOLD fMRI. Recently, an integrated vasodilation and perfusion technique called VAPER has been designed to incorporate both CBF and CBV contrasts and has been shown to reliably resolve laminar activity at different cortical depths at 7 Tesla. Gradient echo BOLD is susceptible to signal variation in draining veins, and thus BOLD response and signal fluctuation are strongly biased toward the cortical surface. The vapor signal, however, is primarily of arterial origin. We are still uncertain of the laminar features of vapor signal fluctuation, which includes physiological and motion noise and meaningful neuronal signal. Here, we examine laminar vapor signal profiles and the degree to which they are influenced by physiological and motion noise as compared to BOLD. Aside from the methods I've already shown, I'll highlight that we used a modified 3D EPI sequence to acquire fMRI images alternating between a blood signal suppressed condition, called Dante, and a blood signal augmented condition, called control. Vapor contrast was computed via dynamic subtraction of the signal in Dante and control volumes to be sensitive to CBF and CBV changes while also suppressing BOLD weighting. For those who are interested, we also used partial Fourier imaging with an acceleration factor of 7/8 and grappa of 3. We scanned 4 healthy volunteers for a total of 9 sessions. Slice position is shown here and was used to cover in the right hemisphere the 5 regions, the layer profiles of which I have drawn here. We conducted all laminar analyses in the original EPI space. We manually drew CSF, gray matter, and white matter borders for all 5 regions, and we interpolated signal across 20 layers of gray matter using the Laney software. To determine physiological and head motion noise contributions to BOLD and vapor signals, we constructed a regression model containing drift, task, motion, and physiological components. Physiological time courses, in this case respiratory and cardiac, were produced by AFNI's RetroTS program using the RetroICOR method. The sum of squared error for the full model was represented in our results as SSE full, while delta SSE MO and delta SSE PS exclude physiological noise or motion, respectively, to estimate their relative noise contributions. This was our central measure. Looking at our first figure in the top left of the results, we see a vascular influence in residual and RetroICOR explained signal fluctuations. Notably, auditory cortex has both the strongest signal fluctuation and strongest blood inflow. This will come up again later. Using gray and white matter masks, an example of which we have to the right here, we conducted a group-level analysis of these fluctuations. Preliminary results are shown in the bar chart below. I'll note that, higher values are worse here, indicating more noise. First, if we look at the middle bar plot, we see that RetroICOR's model explains more physiological noise in BOLD than in vapor for all tissue types. Similarly, to the right, head motion explains more variance in BOLD than in vapor, suggesting the subtraction used to compute vapor contrast mitigates motion-induced noise. To the left, however, we see that unmodeled residual signal in vapor is approximately 27% larger than in BOLD. However, we already know that vapor is a less sensitive contrast than BOLD. We're not arguing that. Notably, that decrease in sensitivity is actually rather well bound, with vapor never being more noisy than by a factor of square root of 2. However, what is important to note is that vapor's decreased sensitivity is outweighed by its improved specificity with respect to other non-BOLD alternatives. Finally, if we look at these line plots here, we see that in the first row, layer-dependent signal fluctuation decreases with cortical depth in both contrasts for the 5 ROIs, but notably, this depth-wise decrease is less pronounced in vapor, whose values are shown in blue. The smaller slope here indicates that it has a more stable layer profile. Cortical depth increases as you go to the right in each plot, of course. We also see in the second row of line charts that regional physiological nodes modeled by RetroICOR decreases in both contrast with cortical depth as expected, with less explained physiological noise in vapor than in BOLD, as we saw earlier. Let's note, however, that to the right, auditory cortex seems to be an exception to this rule. It has both much higher signal fluctuation than the other regions and is more strongly weighted toward the cortical surface. we do not see the same increased stability in the layer profile of vapor as we did for the other 4 regions. This is likely due to its proximity to large-scale vasculature that we noted above earlier, making it a more noisy region to begin with, and not indicative of the trend that we see in these other 4 regions. Thus, we can conclude that both residual and retroichor explained signal fluctuations in vapor is less biased toward the cortical surface than in BOLD. This more stable layer profile for vapor suggests that it could perhaps be a more precise contrast for future layer-specific analyses. Thanks for stopping by.